I would assume that means we're safe to start.
Go for
Okay, my name is Andersen, and I have a degree in dietetics. I call myself a food and body peace coach, or you could call me a nutritionist. I actually got really interested in nutrition when I was in high school, and I knew from the time I was a freshman in high school that that's what I wanted to study. And it's kind of interesting looking back. Retrospect is often 2020, but I think a lot of the reason why I was so interested in it is I had some borderline disordered eating behaviors for many years, and those can be really tricky and sneaky and not necessarily manifest them in ways that you would think an eating disorder or disordered eating would look like. Right out of high school, I randomly tried out for a pageant and I won. And I found myself at a national pageant for the Miss America program. And I was just 19 years old, so kind of naive, well, really naive. I grew up in a small town in Wyoming, and then here I am, like, on national TV. And to prepare for that, I had a trainer, and we did a lot of exercises to prepare, but then she also put me on a diet. So the first time in my life, I was on a diet as a 19-year-old, and I think that I kind of misunderstood the instructions a little bit, but that diet kind of spun me into disordered eating. And if I would have had a me at the time, I would have said it was an eating disorder. So I went off to school, I went to BYU, and I studied in the dietetics program. And it wasn't until probably my senior year, I learned about this new approach to eating and food that was called intuitive eating. And the book had actually only been written 2 years before I even started the program. So it still wasn't a common practice to teach. And when I left college, we were still teaching very much like calories in, calories out for food. And that's the way that I consulted for years, probably 5 or 6 years. I would have women come and I would track what they were eating and make sure they had plenty of vitamins and minerals and calories for their diet, and then we would adjust it. Usually they were coming to me for weight loss. Sometimes it was health issues that came as a result of other underlying issues that they had. But the more I consulted, the more I realized I wasn't really helping these women. I wasn't helping them long term. I wasn't helping them become healthier. Sometimes they'd lose a few pounds here and there. They'd learn how to cook more from scratch. But it wasn't until I started teaching them how to truly make peace with food that we started seeing some progress. So I'm going to teach you the physiology of how we digest our food. We're going to talk about hormones. And then I'm going to teach you the action of how you can actually get in touch with what your body needs for food without having to follow someone else's prescriptive regimen. So I'm going to teach you a little bit about hormones, what hormones are involved with eating food, and then the stress response. First of all, what are hormones? Hormones are those messengers that go from your brain to different organs of your body to tell you what you need. Of course, it's your kidneys, thyroid, the ones that are most related to digesting food. Kidneys, thyroid, pancreas, reproductive organs, heart, gut, thymus, skin, fat, tissues, and placenta, of course, for pregnant women. Let's first talk about insulin. Insulin is that hormone that's made in your pancreas. And I put this picture of a backhoe on here because the insulin acts like the backhoe that scoops up sugar from your blood and then dumps it into your cells so that you can use it as energy. If for some reason your insulin is not working properly, or your pancreas where insulin is made is not working properly, that's when you get high blood sugar. And oftentimes that leads, if it goes on long enough, type 2 diabetes. So how do you make sure that you're regulating your insulin? You eat regular, balanced meals, exercise, and you manage your stress. We're going to talk more about that. Another important hormone involved in digesting food, and this is what we call the stress hormone, cortisol. Cortisol is made in your adrenal glands, just they sit right on top of your kidneys, and the cortisol kicks in when you're in fight or flight. So if you think about running away from the bear or fighting to protect someone, cortisol starts to spike. And it's a wonderful hormone because it protects you and it shunts all of your blood and your energy to the most important parts of your body that need to work in order to fight the war, right? So to your large muscle groups, to your heart, but unfortunately it also takes blood away from the parts of your body that you don't need when you're fighting the war, like your digestive tract, for one. If your cortisol levels are high long enough, so basically if you're under stress long enough, that cortisol blocks the ability for your body to regulate sugar properly. And I'm going to teach you this with my own kind of chicken scratch illustration that I made here. This is kind of how this works. So if you have prolonged high blood sugar for a long time, that comes from your cortisol blocking the functions of your body to digest that sugar. So if your cortisol is high, whether you're really stressed out, you have an injury, it could be that you're prolonged exercise for too long, that raises your cortisol for too long. Unfortunately, cortisol is trying to help you, right? Trying to help you fight the bear, but it blocks insulin from being produced from your pancreas. Now wait a second, if insulin isn't being made in your pancreas, that means that all this sugar in your blood is just sitting there in your blood. Another thing that cortisol does is it blocks you from your digestive tract working properly. So it just stops, right? So oftentimes, like looking at this little baby, I have 5 children of my own, and whenever we would travel or get a little bit out of the routine, you know what would happen to that little baby? They would get blocked up and constipated because they're under stress and their digestive tract has just stopped working as well as it should. Another tricky thing about that is, okay, if insulin's not able to do its job because cortisol's blocking it from bringing the sugar from your blood and into your cells, that means whenever you eat food, what's happening? If you're eating food, but insulin can't really digest it, your brain is still saying, hey, I'm hungry, hey, I need energy, and everything's just jamming up into this mess. Another thing that cortisol will also do is it elevates your LDL cholesterol, which is not the one that you want to have. LDL is the one that you want to have low. And then what that does is it messes with your liver. So I think we can see it's not good to be under high stress for too long. So how do we manage it? How do we make sure that we're not doing this to run off into this vicious cycle? Where I come in is making sure that you're eating meals and snacks every 2 to 3 hours. And then things that you obviously know, like making sure you exercise, do things that calm you down, bring you joy. This is also where Dr. Bill and Dr. Josh's practice and mine align, because when you're in pain from a subluxation or anything else that might be going on that can help from the alignment of your spine, if you keep that spine healthy and you keep your pain management under control, then you're able to get those cortisol levels down. And your body's able to function properly. Thanks, Josh. He said, amen. Okay, here's some other hormones that I want to talk about. When we are talking about hunger and fullness, and this is where we start getting into this whole, how do I know what my body needs? How do I know how often to eat? How do I know when to stop? The thing is, when we were first born, we knew exactly when we were hungry. And mom knows exactly when baby is hungry because baby cries and lets her know it's time to eat, right? And then how does baby know it's time to stop eating? They're just full. They're intuitive to what their body needs for hunger and fullness. And there's something that just happens that's normal. It's a normal part of being a human. But in different societies, we can really get confused about when to eat, how much, and what to eat. Especially now, where nutrition information is all across the board, right? Some say eggs are good, some say eggs are bad. What are we supposed to believe? That's where intuitive eating comes in, and it helps us really cue into what we're feeling. And we can really get to the point where our bodies will crave what we want. So that leads into this hormone here, ghrelin. I like to remember it like grr, your stomach's growling. Ghrelin is the hormone that tells your brain it's time to eat. And it kicks in when your stomach's empty. So it's almost kind of like this regulator that can tell, hey, volume is low, time to eat, ghrelin. So if you will honor that feeling, oh, it's time to eat, then ghrelin can do its job. And then the other opposite hormone will come in and everything will run properly. If we continue to just kind of ignore that knock at the door of ghrelin saying it's time to eat, over time, guess what hormone will come and kick the door down? Cortisol. Because you go into a state of stress. I mean, think about how it feels when you go for a long time without eating food. Your body goes into stress, cortisol kicks in, and then we get back to this mess again. The hormone that works opposite of ghrelin, I could say in coordination, it complements it, is leptin. So leptin is actually produced in your fat tissues, and it's the one that inhibits ghrelin when the stomach is full. So it's like as soon as the glass is filled up from underneath the sink, you see those automated water bottle fillers. Leptin is the one that's like, oh, it's full, time to stop. But something important to recognize here, like the physiology of it, is it's not necessarily like the switch. So if you're approaching a meal and you are ravenously hungry, like you've gotten beyond the point of hungry, your ghrelin hormone is firing like crazy, saying, feed me, feed me, feed me. It's not like the second you take a bite that hormone stops firing. It's still firing throughout that meal. So this is where when you're a little kid, your mom said, slow down so you can taste your food. There's actually wisdom to that, because if we eat so fast when we're that hungry, these hormones don't have a chance to start activating and deactivating. So it really is scientific to slow down when you eat so that leptin has a chance to tell when your stomach is full so that you know when it's time to stop eating. Here's another fun thing. How many of you have ever heard of or experienced the munchies when it's late at night and you're tired? Thank you, Josh. Like we've all been there, right? There's science and physiology behind that. What happens when we're asleep, when we're tired, and we need sleep? Our brain is telling us the same, well, our body is signaling the same thing to our brain as if we're hungry. Basically, it's just saying, I need energy. And our brain doesn't know the difference between energy from food or energy from sleep. So now we know the secret. If we're tired, and it's obviously been a while since we've been getting adequate sleep, or even if we've gone a long time just in poor sleep patterns, cortisol will kick in, and ghrelin will actually also kick in. So remember, ghrelin is the one that's, grr, I'm hungry. So that's why you actually start to feel more hungry late at night, or just when you're tired, you're up all the time with baby, and you will start to feel hungry. Unfortunately, leptin and your insulin sensitivity goes down when you're tired. So this is where, when we talk about stress management, making sure you're getting enough sleep, that's the science of it. Now, I'm not one to say that if you're hungry at night, to just completely ignore that and go to bed. But I would invite you to just take a minute, and this is part of being an intuitive eater. Take a minute and ask yourself, have I fed myself adequately today? Have I had an adequate amount of meals and snacks to provide what I need for today? If the answer to that is no, then have a snack. And you know your body well enough to know what's going to sit well while you're going to sleep at night. Like there are some things that, like piling on right before you go to bed that aren't going to make you feel well when you wake up in the morning. But if you really have had enough throughout the day, you're recognizing you've done a really good job feeding yourself throughout the day, and you're still feeling those munchies, it could be time just to go to bed and give your brain the energy it's asking for. So I've kind of already talked about this, but what do I do to regulate my hormones? Obviously, we gotta eat often enough. This one I like to talk about. I mean, you could do a whole other workshop on exercising in an enjoyable way. You know, there's the type of exercising that's honing and you dread it and you kind of just can't wait to check off that 30-minute box of doing exercise. But then there's the type of exercise that just makes you so excited to wake up in the morning and go lace up your shoes and do it. That's the type of exercise that's going to promote stress management. Good sleep, honor your hunger and fullness needs. We're going to talk about that more. So oftentimes when clients come to me asking for help with nutrition, they often want to just go right here to the top of this hierarchy of food needs, this instrumental foods. Just tell me what I should be eating. Tell me what's good. Tell me what's bad. But I force them to start here at the bottom. Let's make sure you're getting enough. And oftentimes, I work specifically with women. I can work with men too, but this rule of thought, for some reason, resonates with women. Are you getting enough to eat? And oftentimes, they're not. And they'll go for long periods of time without eating anything, and then the ravenous hunger hits in, and then they overeat, and it becomes that vicious cycle, right? So let's first make sure you're getting enough food. And then let's work our way up the pyramid to preferred, familiar, and decent food, reliable access to food, good tasting food. So that's where we can start getting to the point where we can play with the foods that we actually really enjoy. And then there's the novel foods that are just more like the ones that maybe would be a little more expensive, or if that makes sense. And then we can get up to the instrumental food where it's like, okay, let's say you've got an issue with cholesterol, and that's something that we need to be working on. That's where this instrumental food comes in. There really are foods that will help you to bring your cholesterol level down if you will increase them in your diet. But it's not going to help you at all if you're not getting adequate meals and snacks throughout the day. Because like I showed you before, you're in that fight or flight, which can happen by not getting enough regular meals, that actually just raises your bad cholesterol as well. So here is this principle in action. It's intuitive eating. There are 10 principles in intuitive eating that can help us when we've gotten a little out of tune with what our body needs for food. Start practicing each of these principles and get to the point where we really can know what our body needs. And there is wisdom to this order. We don't necessarily, like, some of my clients will come to me saying, Megan, I get it now. I realize that the diet industry isn't all that I thought it used to be. That this whole like get slim fast, lose weight and keep it off forever just doesn't work for me. And I'm ready to be done dieting. Teach me how to do that. So some people come to me already having rejected that diet mentality, that there are specific foods that are going to make them have this ideal body. So oftentimes when they come, we can just go right to number 2. Let's talk about honoring your hunger. And I'm going to skip forward and then go back. This is one of the tools that intuitive eating uses to help you practice listening to whether you are full, whether you actually are hungry, when it's time to eat, when it's time to stop. And it's a lot like the scales that you see in doctor's office, like what's your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? Same with hunger, like neutral, or you start to get those pangs. And for some of my clients, they've come to me and this works really well. And for others, they're like, Megan, I don't know, because when I'm hungry, I don't get pangs. I just like get a headache. I don't feel that grr in my stomach. I just start a migraine coming on. Or sometimes it's like, I just start thinking about food. I just start thinking about when the next meal might be, or thinking about what I had last night, it was so good. And that's the clue, oh, I'm starting to get hungry. It's easy when you've gone for so long dieting or ignoring your hunger cues to really just forget what they are. So let me go back to this, honoring your hunger. When you're hungry and you look at that scale, it's time to start eating. And this is where I say every 2 to 4 hours. Raise your hand if you feel like that sounds like too often to be eating, every 2 to 4 hours. Yeah, sometimes that feels like I should just ate. That, I mean, 2 to 4 is a pretty good range, right? Like every 2 hours is probably too much for some. Every 4 hours might be about right. Every 2 hours is about right for a little one here. Let's move on. Make peace with food. This is where we start practicing full permission to eat all foods. Sometimes we just have to give ourselves that permission to try those foods that maybe we've labeled as off limits in the past. Maybe we've been labeling some foods as good, and we've given them kind of a power over us that if we'll eat these, somehow we're going to have that magic bullet feeling. And sometimes we do the opposite, where we've labeled some foods as bad. No, never, should never have these. The tricky part about that, mentally and emotionally, which intuitive eating is a lot of cueing into both of those. If we've labeled a food as bad, and we feel like we're being really good by not eating those bad foods, so we avoid them, and we avoid them, and we avoid them, and then we finally cave and we eat it. What does that make us? Does that make us bad if we just ate the bad food? And then we can get in this cycle and really get in our heads with the way that we should be feeding ourselves. So, full permission to eat all foods is that principle number 3. Number 4 is challenge the food police. Sometimes that's more of an inner voice than it is other people, but we all have that friend that likes to talk about whatever diet that they're on, and you shouldn't be eating that because it has antibiotics in it, or the chickens were fed this or that in processing, and you start hearing all of these health claims about the food that we eat, and it can really mix you up on what it is that your body is actually craving. And so challenge that inner voice, or sometimes that friend who's wanting to tell you all the poisonous things that you're eating, and really start listening to what it is that your body needs. Discover the satisfaction factor. That's that feeling where you have had a meal that you have enjoyed, it tasted good, and it just felt good, right? There are some foods that taste really good, and then they land like a brick in your gut, right? And then there are those foods that make you feel great, but you're still like looking for the next thing, right? I like to teach my clients when we're talking about the satisfaction factor, it's nourishing and it's satisfying. And it usually includes more than one food group. So it's hard to feel satisfied with a slice of bread, but it's a lot easier to feel satisfied with a slice of bread that has some sort of protein and a vegetable and a sugar and something bad in it to make more of a complete meal. The next one is feel your fullness, and that's where this scale starts to come back in as well. In the middle of the meal, as you're eating and you're enjoying your food, it's okay to take a few seconds to pause. Am I still enjoying this food? Am I still wanting more? And just take a second, and that's where you start practicing that fullness and when it's time to stop eating. Number 7, cope with your emotions with kindness. It's kind of like a funny meme that you'll see, or just in the movies where they've had a bad day and then they just go to town on the ice cream, right? Like, this is how I'm going to drown my sorrows for the day. Intuitive eating challenges you to maybe actually feel your emotions. Give yourself some grace, cope with them with kindness, and don't necessarily turn towards food to fill that stress that you're feeling. Number 8 is respecting your body. 9, movement we kind of talked about. There's a difference between the exercise that you're dreading versus the type that you're excited to do. And then 10, there's a reason this is here at the end. That's where the gentle nutrition starts to come. So there's actually a lot of healing and a lot of thought work that you do before we get to the gentle nutrition part as a nutritionist. Yeah, we already talked about the scale. So that is the physiology and the action of intuitive eating. And like I mentioned, like it's an actual book written by dietitians that had a very similar experience to me, where they really wanted to help their clients make peace with food in a way that wasn't just focusing on a specific diet regimen. So if you're interested in learning more about that, there's the book, and then this is my contact information, and I offer consultations to help people get right back to what we've been talking about and becoming an intuitive eater. So we've got 3 minutes. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, I'm all ears. I love answering questions. But if there are none, we can end a little early.
Do you work with children?
Say that again.
Do you work with children?
I work with my own. I have never actually had a child client. I'm trying to think the youngest client that I've had. It's oftentimes women in the same demographic.
Teenagers.
Help me remember. Oh yeah. Yes. So I had a pair of sisters that I worked with who both were struggling with eating disorders. So the youngest was maybe 16,
Okay.
and the next one was 17. But when it comes to feeding children, that's another set of slides that I love teaching too. Because when we're talking intuitive eating, there are a lot of things in the childhood years that follow you into your adult years that can help you listen to your body more or make it harder for you to really listen to what you need.
Yeah.
But,
We have an 8-year-old.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I have 5 kids, and each of them has had a different approach. They have different palates.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, as a young mom, especially right out of the dietetics program, I had a baby this age as I was graduating. So I came out of that program just thinking I knew the perfect way to eat. And projecting that onto my children, I started watching them almost out of spite, like eating those things that mom would say, no, we don't buy those or whatever. And then they'd go to their friend's house and just binge on whatever was in their friend's pantry because it wasn't available at ours. And so one of the things that I started practicing as a mom was bringing those foods into our home, which I had previously labeled as off limits. So now it became more normal, and it wasn't like this novelty that they were never going to have again. And now those foods will sit in our pantry twice as long as they would have before, when we would just binge on them as soon as they hit.
Still goes way too fast. Still spending.
There are 5 of them, it's just 15 to 5, so the food bill is really high. But yeah, if you need help with kids, I can definitely help you.
Okay.
Does the speed at which you eat have an effect on your ability to recognize them?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, so that's
where
where that leptin is, right? Ghrelin is the one that makes you feel hungry. Leptin is the one that says I'm full. But if you're eating so fast, that leptin hormone doesn't have a chance to say, oh, actually I'm done. Stop. It's time to stop. So yeah, that's where that wisdom of mom saying, slow down, taste your food. It can cause you to overeat when you eat. And then also, like, when you think about this, if you're not taking a second to pause in between your meal to see where you're at on the scale of fullness, and you're just still going through, then you might get to the point where you're here and not notice it until you're here, feeling sick. Yes.
How does this kind of relate to the drink you have with your food as well? It's like water versus a soda, or an energy drink versus juice.
We've seen so many, maybe I should say. There's a construction guy in the room. I think they survive off of them. You guys work so hard, but so many energy.
I drink soda, but
Jeez.
energy drinks are no.
Oh, so that's where we can talk about leptin and ghrelin again, because they really are like receptors in your stomach. That's like, is the stomach full or is there still room? And so when you're drinking along with your meal, obviously your stomach's getting full along with the food that you're putting in. And it will get fuller faster, like your fullness factor will come in sooner when you're drinking with it. Obviously, there's a difference between water and anything else that has anything else in it, whether it's a soda or a juice or a smoothie. You know, sometimes you'll hear this saying, just drink a bunch of water before you eat so that you won't eat so much. And that's okay, but if you're coming at it from an approach of trying to like manipulate the size of your body, trying to like eat some prescriptive way, then it's good to get back into it with like, what is my intention here? Am I just trying to eat less? Or am I trying to make sure am I trying to make sure that my body digests this properly? A lot of it is a mix. If your intention is just to shrink your body, and that's why you're doing certain things, then that's where it actually increases your stress when you're trying to feed yourself, and you just start getting that mind game going. And we all know that cycle of weight loss, right? Where you can lose a lot, sometimes fast, and then it oftentimes comes back. And those practices that we do to lose weight really fast, they don't stay. They don't stay. And it can become really frustrating for ourselves when we're gaining and losing and gaining and losing. That's a really in-depth answer to drinking with your meals, but
That was perfect, thank you.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It's my favorite thing to teach. Where can I put this for you, Josh?
And